Howdy! We are here for our weekly anchor message where we are taking a look at the week ahead and looking at our spiritual lessons or assignments for the week. This is sort of like our instructions from headquarters, if you will. So our first card out is the Self, followed by the Ocean, followed by Animal, it's unmanageable. And then we also had the Eternal Child. Underneath the Self, we have the Knight of Wands. Underneath the Eternal Child, we have the Lovers. And that's also with the Ocean. So those two are kind of stacked together. The central column of the reading, if you will. And then underneath Animal, we have Seven of Wands. Awesome. So I'm going to let you guys listen to the audio and then we'll be right back. Over the span of a human incarnation, we have an assignment to awaken our dormant light in order to become more fully human. Humans, straight out of the box, come with what I like to describe as the base package soul. We go through life distracted in material pursuits and sensual logic and reasoning. At this level, our consciousness is basically robotic and running on programming. We're not yet sovereign beings, capable of free will. Free will is like the spiritual realm. Free will is like in the spiritual realm what consent is like in the material realm. It has to come without coercion or reflex. Our great invitation in this life is to spiritually awaken and go through a process of ascending to a higher consciousness as we merge with our higher self, the part of ourselves that is both human and divine. In order to do this, we must chip away at all that does not bear affinity with God within ourselves. As we break more and more layers of egoic illusion and liberate ourselves from the patterns born of our animal instincts and return back to a pure place of uncontaminated consciousness that is safeguarded by our eternal child within. The eternal child, counter to the wounded child, has never known the pain and fear and lies that stripped us of our original innocence. The eternal child holds the secrets of our true purpose and calling. We must answer the call to adventure that invites us on our quest to search for this eternal child that will give us the answers that we seek. Once we receive this guidance, we must apply it in the choices we make and the actions we take. So one of the focuses of this week's Torah portion, which is the portion of Korach or Korah, is that Korah thought that he should be the high priest and not Aaron, Moses' brother. And so the overview of the story is about what happens when we get our eyes set on something that doesn't belong to us, and then we go and take that thing. We go take light from the thing that's not really meant for us. When we pursue something that's not really on our path, when we take something that's not ours, when, it's just, it creates chaos and it doesn't lead to fulfillment. In fact, when we take what's not ours, we lose that thing and even possibly something from what is ours. We lose what we have. Not only do we lose the thing that we took that's not ours, but then we lose what we have as well. So in that vein, we go through life and we don't know sometimes. It's not clear, like, if I'm pursuing something that is truly aligned with my purpose and on my path, or if it's a shiny object that I'm chasing because it looks appealing, but it's really meant for someone else. So how do we know the difference, and how do we tap into what is in alignment with our authentic nature, and then what we have sort of kind of adopted because we see other people doing it and we compare ourselves to them, and then we're sort of trying to keep up with the Joneses, or we see their version of success and flow and blessing, and we're like, oh, we have something that we attach a graven image to of what that looks like, and so then we project that on ourselves. So it's really like this programmed, oh, I should want that thing because a lot of people want that thing and it looks good, it looks appealing, it looks like there's a lot of benefits and bonuses to that thing, and I can see myself dressed up in that thing. But for us, it's a costume and not our real vestments. So how do we know, where we've been programmed to want something, and then what's truly the calling of our soul and what we're being led by? And I think that's what today's reading is all about. So the self here, to me, represents the higher self within. And so when we are born as humans, we're not like coming right out of the box fully human and fully realized. We're like a lower level of what we could be. We're not awakened. We're not evolved. We're like, we have what I call, like, we all get a base level of soul to work with. And it can be evolved and transcended and added onto, but it's just like a base package. And so that soul gets us around, but it's mostly being kind of pulled and tugged by our animal-based instincts and our egoic nature, our evil inclination, and the tendencies of the flesh. It's kind of like a reflexive response system. It's sort of like unconscious programming. You're really sort of on an automated system, and your reflexes or your responses are reflexive rather than proactive and of your full choice and full presence. Now we can come to a point in our lives where there's like a catalyst that begins the process of awakening. And awakening, it happens in these waves. And over time, it evolves this process. And if we surrender to the awakening, the process goes along smoother. But if we resist the awakening, then we keep having these catalytic events that try to prompt us awake, right? They're like spiritual defibrillators. So we go on this process of spiritual awakening, and through that process, the layers of our ego get chiseled away. We refine ourselves above our animalistic impulses and our evil inclination and our robotic or selfish or materialistic nature. And so then we transcend that consciousness and we start to reflect what is the higher self, the highest potential expression of ourself in the human incarnation. And then we become human and divine, where we start to realize some of those, what we consider from an animalistic nature, supernatural powers, but really what is our divine inheritance, but we have to work to claim that. We can't just be given those attributes. They're dormant until we activate and wield them through that process. So this, to me, is this moment where we've come to this fork in the road where we have a choice of which path to follow, and we have a moment and an opportunity to establish awareness while we're making our choices. The Knight of Wands is really enthusiastic and passionate and go-getter energy. I'm ready to jump in and tackle a task. So this is our excitement and our curiosity and our passion. And that's just getting a revamp, right? But we need to be conscious of how we're directing our energy and our time, because it matters, right? The minutes and hours of the day seem so fleeting. And so how are we spending our time? Are we spending our time wisely? Today there was half of our service staff were going to get cut today. We have an option of either volunteering to take the cut, or we can have the manager spin a wheel, the wheel of fortune, and it'll land on the names, and whoever it lands on gets a cut. And so sometimes, depending on the nature of how business has been going, sometimes we all just kind of want them to spin the wheel, because then it's like we kind of want a cut, but we don't want to like ask for the cut. We don't want to be irresponsible financially, but we want there to be an option to have a night off, right? And so that was where I was at tonight. I was like, man, I'm not gonna take a cut, but I would like to get cut by the wheel if God wills it so, because I wanted to spend time researching for our Secret Teachings publication, and I wanted to maybe even have time for extra curricular reading and study as well. So I just part of this is making content, but that's just the means to getting it out. There's actual study and consideration and meditation and pontificating required, and making myself available for the research and the discovery and the study aspect as well. And then there's the actual creation of it, and then the getting it out there and the sharing it. So it all takes a lot of time. So I was really happy to get that time off today, but it makes me think twice when I'm sitting down going, I'm going to kill some time. Should I watch a video? Should I do this? Should I do that? I can't afford to have shiny object syndrome, right? And then in my life leading up to this, I had the tendency to see certain hobbies and things that I was interested in and kind of think, oh, is this my thing? Maybe I will make this my bread and butter. And then in the end, a lot of those skills and interests were parts of the pieces of the whole that I've created and I am finding my way into. But fully pursuing those as my purpose, I was getting off track, right? So how do we know where to direct our energy and our time and our focus and our passion? Where is that the higher self showing us that is a unique and authentic expression of our self and our special purpose in this world, right? Because if we're not doing our special purpose, then there's like a little void. That's a Liz-size hole in the world, or you, or whatever. So it's about going inward and distinguishing what's driving our impulses. Why do we want certain things? And contextualizing those things. Is this a side interest and a hobby, or is this part of my calling? And then we can, number and place our priorities, and we can then trim out and prune the things that are really just taking up too much time, right? And that aren't really yielding anything super beneficial. Sometimes, for instance, I like to watch stand-up comedy, and that's not a waste of time because that uplifts me. It gets my creative juices going. It tickles my funny bone. It really changes my consciousness and my mental state. And I know I'm funny sometimes on this channel, but when I'm not talking about serious matters, I'm hysterical. And people tell me all the time you should do an open mic night, or you should pursue comedy. And sometimes I'll be telling someone just legitimately something that happened to me, and they'll just stop me and they'll be like, is this a bit? No, it's me. It's what I'm telling you. This happened to me earlier. So sometimes I kind of wonder, I'm like, wow, is my real calling comedy? Because I think that comedians can be so prophetic, and they can really deliver a message in a way that is disarming. And art is so good about that. You can sneak up on an individual and give them an idea, or implant an idea, or open them up to be curious about an idea that could unfold within themselves through art, rather than when you just directly say something to people, it doesn't have, it's just so limited at that point, right? So when you give someone something in a creative way, it gives them room to expand like the ocean, the depths of the ocean. So part of, like tuning in to find our purpose and our calling and aligning ourselves more with that, and then testing it against our authenticity. Are these things that other people value and it's not really my thing and I'm excited to see them do it, or is this really for me? And so I think part of this is, the oceans here representing not only our own subconscious, but the depths of what we are unconscious to, the depths of the hidden mystery of reality and existence, the depths of the hidden mysteries of the soul and our own personality, even the parts of ourselves we're not seeing, and what's driving us. So again, we want to go deep under the surface levels of the water, which can be choppy and can be, pulling us this way and that, and it can be distracting. But if we go below the surface, then everything is still and quiet. And so we can go deeper and deeper and deeper. And that's when we access the unconscious and the subconscious, and we start to realize things that have been motivating forces for us, or memories that we forgot about that unlock certain questions and riddles within ourselves. We tap down even further into the eternal child. And without reading any of Kim Kranz's writings on her take on the eternal child, I didn't really look up anything from the book today, as I often don't, but sometimes I do. But today I did not. Today, the eternal child, as it was speaking to me, it was showing me, like, archetypally, there are many characters and archetypes within us all. And we have an inner child. And even within that inner child, there are aspects of that inner child, or manifestations of that inner child. The wounded inner child is like the child that took the impact of all the trauma. And that is the child that has been on the defense and has been whispering into our depths, defense mechanisms. Hey, this really threatened our well-being and our survival in the child's perception, because everything is more serious and huge and magnified as a child. So, this threatened me and traumatized me as a child. And to avoid having this experience again, we need to never do that again, or never say that again, or make ourselves small or agreeable or whatever. Don't tell people how you feel, or they're going to think you're lying, or whatever it is that conclusions you drew to protect yourself as a child get placed in your hard drive, and those become your operating systems. And so until we realize that that's what's happened, we are just driven by that wounded inner child, which may stick parts of ourselves in our shadow, because that shadow self is a threat to our belonging and our well-being and our continuation and our survival, or at least in our perception it is, but it really isn't. And so part of our work is to go back and find, okay, what parts of ourselves did we hide away in the shadow because we thought that made us more palatable and acceptable? And then how can we heal those parts of us and reintegrate those? The shadow self isn't necessarily our negative traits. It's just what has been hidden, what has fallen into the shadow and been eclipsed because of the other personality aspects, or things that we thought were more commercially appealing to the masses, right? So underneath all that programming, when we strip that away, what we have truly is the eternal child, which is our intact child within, that never took any of the impact of the trauma. And so this is the innocent child that never felt the fear, or was lied to, or made wary, or untrusting. Like, this child is like the shielded from everything. And so this child is the true expression of your innocent spirit. And the seed level of the direction that your soul was trying to whisper to you. Because when we're younger, we have such a clearer connection with our root truth. and that aspect of the higher self, the spirit that can speak to us. We're not tainted by all of the layers of soot and grime and dings and scratches that we take on through life. And so the eternal child, it's like if we can get back to the root of that, even the depths of, it's not always just going back in time into our childhood, but even within our childhood, before any of the fears and the shyness or the timidity or what have you, or the feeling that you have to perform, have to do this, have to do that. What did your little self yearn for? What did your little self dream about? What did your little self feel like was your purpose and your driving why, and what inspired you at that time? What sparked your curiosity? What did you want to spend your time doing? And if you could apply that to like a fully formed gift, kind of what would that look like? I was thinking about this myself, and when I was little, I would sit for hours in the mirror and I would have shows. I would put on characters just like the people do on social media now, like Andy Marie Tillman, where she does all these characters and she does these monologues and they're hilarious. I would just do that with myself for hours in my mirror, and I would be like having my own Pee-wee's Playhouse. And then I would have a talk show where I would talk to guests and ask them questions and talk about, important issues and things that I thought were, compelling topics. And and then I also saw celebrities who would get involved in things like Feed the Children, and they would be like ambassadors for like Goodwill, the Goodwill ambassador people and people like that, like Angelina Jolie, and that was somebody I admired as a teenager. But before that, it was like Sally Struthers and Feed the Children, or it was just like celebrities every now and then like talking about an issue when they went on like a Tonight Show or whatever. And so I did not know as a young person, I thought, oh, that means I want to be an actress, because actresses get to go on talk shows and they also get to go be different people and have different experiences to understand people better, and they have an adventurous life because they have all different, they get to live in all these different capacities, and so they're wise, and then they have time off, so they have freedom to do these other things and to study and to prepare for these roles and to explore these different interests. Now, when you look at my life, I was in film and I did acting in different capacities in my younger life, but I never pursued it like as a career, like as a film actor. And I learned all these skills as a crew person to make the films, and I've always been a storyteller and photographer and set designer, like I do all the things. But I didn't end up pursuing acting. But the thing is, what I do now is everything that was the essence of what I did as a child. I talk into my phone, which is the monitor where I can see myself. I'm talking into the mirror. I'm talking about important issues. I'm using these characters sometimes to illustrate a point. And I just find that so interesting. And then I use all my skills from art and television and production and everything combined. I have to use these skills to do what I do, to show up here. And my inner child was always preoccupied with how I could help the children overseas. And now, I use my tithe to help, some young mothers in Gaza and help them feed their families and children. So it's interesting how the expression of that is exactly, along the lines when you look at the essence, right? So it's not always the shell, right? It's not always the sleeve you're looking for. Look down, look deep at the essence, but get back to that inner child, the one that didn't take any of the impact of childhood, right? Of the childhood traumas or of life's traumas and things that kind of like get us rusty over the years. And then those cards were paired with the Lovers. Now the Lovers is not about necessarily you're about to meet your soulmate kind of thing, which in a superficial sense, it can be taken that way sometimes. But on a serious interpretive sense, it's talking about the paths that we take in life and how many times we come up against this why in the road, and we come up to a choice point where we have to choose, and we have to choose this way or that way. what is our motivating driving force when we make those choices and we go in these directions? Because it's a accumulation of our choices that take us down any given direction or path, right? So these things in the moment, given one-offs, right? You're like, oh, it's not that big of a decision. But then when you think about them in their accumulated state, what have you curated as a result of those decisions, right? Where did those decisions take you? So now that we're awakened and we're walking a path as an awakened person, we can say, okay, before I take this step, is this step taking me in the direction of my higher self, of my authentic self, of the calling and the direction of my soul? Is this the divine plan that I'm surrendering to and trusting and kind of going into the unknown in this big adventure? Or am I taking the path of what feels familiar, what feels comfortable, the path that feels like it's the path that is dictated by my wounded inner child, or some egoic inclination? What step am I taking? Why am I taking that step? Ask the self that before you take that step, right? Am I making my choices truly from the heart or from my egoic mind, my animalistic nature? Which brings us to my animal impulses, right? The animal card. Animal card talks about this, it gives this image of an animal kind of being in a cage, and it can get desperate and it can start lashing out in self-preservation, right? And I didn't even realize, like, looking at this, the Seven of Wands is that same feeling of being sort of under pressure and feeling like that animal cornered in a cage, and life is just circling around you, like the third Psalm when it says, I will not fear my enemies who gather around me, 10,000s round about. I can't remember the way it's worded. It's worded weird, but it's like, I will not fear those who rise up against me and gather round about against me. But you get the point. So the Seven of Wands, this is like this man who's breaking out of his limitations. He's breaking out of the cages. He's breaking patterns. He's breaking those cycles. He's breaking the illusion. He's breaking the chains, the generational sins, right? This man in the Seven of Wands, we come up against our patterns, and the pressure is being turned up so that we can see them clearly and then exert the force and the strength and call upon the strength of the Creator to help us finally break those and overcome them. Because if we don't, then we're going to we'll stay in our animalistic level of consciousness, and we aren't going to be fully human and divine. We're not going to be sovereign. We're not going to be exercising cosmic sovereignty and choosing with free will. We're going to be afraid and believing the circumstances that we see and taking it solely at a surface level, and not remembering that we're mystical light beings that have the capacity to wield forces and influence beyond the material if we are connected and united and bearing affinity with the Creator. And so the more that we shed those old parts of our animalistic tendencies and reflexes, and we practice restraint and restriction, and we slow down and we use our higher consciousness to assess and observe and detach and allow the Holy Spirit to bring us a higher perspective, then we can choose, okay, what step am I taking on this path? Am I just having highway hypnosis and checking out and driving for miles without noticing where I'm going? Or am I going to pay attention and choose each step, right? So am I driven by my animalistic impulses and instincts, or which will trigger my fear and my reactive response systems, putting me in effect consciousness versus cause consciousness. Cause consciousness is Creator consciousness. The Creator isn't affected. The Creator just emanates the same all the time. Whereas we are affected. We're the vessel, we're effect consciousness, but when we can restrict our tendencies to be in effect reflexive consciousness, whether that be buy now while supplies last, or, stockpile rice and lentils. Affect consciousness is not when we're in sovereign control of ourselves. We're not making fully cooked choices. We're being coerced in some way by our belief in the illusion of the outer being all there is. When it's not that it's not untrue, the outer is part of reality, but it's only 1% of the reality. And there's a whole inner realm and material and non-material spiritual realm and reality that makes up 99% of the reality. So when we make that internal shift, that's the biggest shift to make that will change the little puny 1%, right? So, yes, I think that we can reconnect with our original cause and purpose this week and see where we have been like Korah. Have we been going after things that aren't really ours, right? Have we been, seeing something that looks shiny but isn't really right for us when we break it down, right? We kind of have that with or we have very much with our love lives, right? Like that's part of becoming mature and starting to choose better options and better potential partners for ourselves, because we can see past the initial chemistry and attraction, and that's obviously important, starts there. But is there enough beyond that? And, are there depths beyond that, right? That are authentically aligned, not just attractive and alluring. All right. Well, that is all for today. I'm going to enjoy the rest of this evening off. I'm going to go for a walk and do the research and the study, and enjoy the day. It was super stormy all day, but now the sun's coming out, so I think it's supposed to get a little rainy again later, but maybe not. Maybe it'll all burn off. Ciao.